Right, so let's talk about democracy, that thing we're told we have. It's a word that gets thrown around a lot. But what does it really mean in practice? We vote, we elect, job done, right? We put a cross on a piece of paper and feel like we've done our civic duty. Well, not quite. The UK political system, often held up as a shining example, has some serious cracks in its facade. These cracks aren't just minor flaws, they're gaping holes that undermine the very foundation of our democracy. Cracks so big you could drive a double-decker bus through them, preferably one paid for with questionable MP expenses. These scandals aren't just isolated incidents, they reveal a deeper systemic problem. From how we vote to who wields influence, the system seems increasingly rigged against the average person. It's as if the voices of ordinary citizens are being drowned out by those with money and power. Is this really democracy? Or just a carefully curated illusion designed to keep the powerful in power? It's a question we all need to ask ourselves. Buckle up, because we're about to dive headfirst into the murky depths of UK politics. We're going to look at how our electoral system often fails to reflect the will of the people, how politicians seem more beholden to lobbyists than their constituents, and how the policies they enact often benefit the few at the expense of the many. How politicians seem more beholden to lobbyists than their constituents, making decisions that serve special interests rather than the public good, and how austerity measures seem to always hit the most vulnerable the hardest. These policies often exacerbate inequality, leaving the rich richer and the poor poorer. By the end, you might just start questioning everything you thought you knew about democracy in the UK. And that's not a bad thing. And trust me, that's a good thing, because the first step to fixing a problem is admitting you have one. Only then can we start to make meaningful changes. So let's get started, shall we? It's time to peel back the layers and see what's really going on. Let's talk about the first past the post, FPTP, electoral system. The system we use to elect our MPs. Sounds simple enough, right? You cast your vote and the candidate with the most votes wins. The person with the most votes wins. Straightforward, isn't it? Well, yes, but that simplicity masks a deeply flawed system. It's not as democratic as it seems. Imagine a pie chart representing all the votes cast in an election. Each slice of the pie represents a different party's share of the vote. Now imagine that pie chart sliced up into 650 tiny slivers, each representing a constituency. Each sliver is a battleground. In each sliver, only the biggest slice gets the prize, a seat in Parliament. The rest of the votes in that sliver don't count towards representation. This means a party can win a significant number of seats without ever winning the popular vote. They can dominate Parliament with a minority of the total votes. This isn't just a hypothetical scenario. It's a reality we've seen time and again. In the 2024 general election, Labour won a majority government with just 33.7% of the vote. That's less than a third of the total votes cast. That's right, over 66% of voters did not vote for the party currently running the country. The majority of voters are left unrepresented. How can this be democratic? How can we call this fair representation? It's like ordering a pizza with friends and having one person dictate the toppings even though most people wanted something else. The majority's preference is ignored. It's a system that silences voices, particularly those of smaller parties and their supporters. Their votes are often wasted, and that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the flaws of FPTP. There are many more issues lurking beneath the surface. The 2024 election wasn't an anomaly. It highlighted a worrying trend in British politics, governments being elected with less than half of the popular vote. This means a party can come to power without the clear mandate of the people they claim to represent. Think about that for a second. A party can implement sweeping policies affecting millions of lives without ever having convinced a majority of the electorate. It's like being forced to eat your vegetables even though you clearly said you wanted chips. This begs the question, is a government truly legitimate if it doesn't have the support of the majority? The current system allows for a dangerous disconnect between the governed and those in government. It creates a breeding ground for cynicism and distrust as people feel increasingly alienated from the political process. And when people feel like their voices don't matter, when they see a system that doesn't reflect their will, Is it any wonder that faith in democracy begins to crumble? We've all been there. An election rolls around and politicians morph into used car salesmen promising the moon on a stick. Lower taxes, better healthcare, world peace. They paint a picture so rosy it feels like a dream come true. They'll say anything to get your vote. Their words are like sweet melodies designed to enchant and captivate. But once they're comfortably nestled in their parliamentary seats, those promises often evaporate faster than a raindrop in the Sahara. The grand visions they sold us fade into distant memories. Remember that time a certain someone promised to build a bridge, a very specific bridge, and then, well, didn't. The project was abandoned, left to gather dust. Or how about that pledge to reduce immigration to tens of thousands? A promise as hollow as a politician's apology. The numbers never changed, and the issue remained unresolved. The lack of accountability is staggering. They dodge questions, avoid scrutiny, and carry on as if nothing happened. There's no real mechanism to hold MPs to their word, no consequences for breaking promises, and they walk away unscathed, leaving us to deal with the fallout. It's like ordering a 3-course meal and only getting a sad salad. The main course and dessert are nowhere to be found. You're left feeling cheated, wondering if you were foolish to believe in the first place. The trust you placed in them feels misplaced. This culture of broken promises breeds cynicism and apathy. People lose faith in the system and voter turnout declines. Why bother engaging with a system that seems designed to disappoint? The cycle of disillusionment continues. It's time to demand better. We deserve leaders who keep their promises and work for the people. We need real accountability, mechanisms that empower voters to hold their elected officials to their word. It's time for change. Because promises are meaningless if there's no price to pay for breaking them. Let's make sure our voices are heard and our votes truly matter. All right, let's dive into the topic of expenses and perks. You see, members of Parliament, or MPs, are entitled to claim expenses for costs incurred while performing their duties. This can include travel, accommodation, and office expenses. It's, meant to ensure that they can effectively serve their constituents without being out of pocket. Now, it's important to note that these expenses are subject to strict rules and oversight to prevent misuse. There's like an independent body that oversees and audits these claims. They make sure everything is above board and transparent. In addition to expenses, MPs also receive certain perks. For example, they have access to parliamentary facilities and resources, which can help them in their legislative and constituency work. Plus, they get a pension scheme, which is, well, pretty standard for public service roles. So that's a quick overview of the expenses and perks associated with being an MP. It's designed to support them in their work while maintaining accountability and transparency. Lobbyists play a significant role in shaping policies in the United Kingdom. They represent various vested interests, from large corporations to non-governmental organizations. While lobbying is a legitimate part of the democratic process, it raises questions about transparency and influence. Who really holds the power when decisions are made? And how can the public be sure that their interests are being fairly represented? The era of austerity in the UK has been marked by significant budget cuts and a focus on reducing public debt. But, this approach has not been without its critics. Many argue that austerity measures have disproportionately affected the most vulnerable in society, leading to increased inequality and hardship. So, how do we balance fiscal responsibility with social justice? And what are the long-term consequences of austerity policies? Trust in political institutions is crucial for a healthy democracy. However, recent years have seen a decline in public trust towards politicians and government bodies in the UK. Scandals, perceived inefficiencies, and unfulfilled promises can erode this trust. So where does our trust go when it seems to be lost? And what steps can be taken to rebuild confidence in the political system? Civic engagement is the cornerstone of a vibrant democracy. Yet many people feel disconnected from the political process. Calls for reform are growing louder, with demands for more transparency, accountability, and participation. How can we encourage more people to get involved in shaping their future? And what reforms are necessary to make the political system more inclusive and responsive to the needs of all citizens?